Hello, welcome to this forum featuring the candidates for Congressional District 5. The district runs from Fountain Hills and Scottsdale down through Tempe, parts of Mesa and Chandler, Ahwatukee foothills. I'm Robert Ledger, Assistant Opinions Editor for the Arizona Republic, and joining me for the debate today are Nick Coons, the Libertarian candidate, David Schweikert, the Republican candidate, and Harry Mitchell, the Democratic candidate and the incumbent. To get us started, gentlemen, what's the most pressing issue facing the residents of District 5? Mr. Coons.
Well, I think the economy is probably the biggest thing. I mean, that's where the focus is.
Just in a few words, then we'll come back and talk. So the economy.
Yes.
Jobs and economic growth.
The economy and jobs.
Wow, we all agree on one thing. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Coons. What would you do about the economy?
Well, I think that the premise of the question there kind of raises one of the big myths that people have, is that the idea that the government can fix the economy. The government really can only do two things when it comes to the economy. It can kind of do nothing and let the market take care of itself, or it can make it worse. The best thing the government can do right now is to get out of the way and let the market solve the issues, most of these issues caused by the government to begin with.
Mr. Schweikert.
When Joyce and I are out walking door to door, even in some of the neighborhoods I grew up around in South Scottsdale, it's heartbreaking. You will hit streets where it's, the people have left, you knock on the door and you talk to them and their hours have been cut back dramatically. The fact of the matter is, if we are going to save this community and have some options, we got to start getting some economic growth. We've now seen a couple of years of economic stimulus monies, billions and billions of dollars being spent, and it's been a failure. We're going the wrong direction.
So what would you do to get us in the right direction?
I would literally have done the complete opposite of what we did. When you drop almost $1 trillion in economic stimulus, and you literally only get, a few hundred jobs here in our congressional district, and there was 35, 34 million spent here in this community, you start to divide that cost per job. This is crazy. Could you imagine if we had reached out and said, look, we're going to use some dollars to incentivize small businesses with economic growth. We're going to change some of the regulatory environment where it's taking so long to get permitting to grow, and even step up and do some big boy stuff of like product liability so we can actually stop driving manufacturers out of this country.
Mr. Mitchell.
I think the most important thing is, in terms of getting our economy back on the right track again, is tax cuts. And I have been a big supporter of tax cuts, particularly for small businesses, because small businesses are the driver of this economy. 60 to 80% of job growth happens to be in small businesses. In fact, 73% of the businesses in this district are small businesses. So I would say that the thing that we need to do is to make sure that we can incentivize and help small businesses, and we can do that mainly with tax cuts.
What taxes specifically would you cut?
Well, the taxes that I think are important are the estate tax, the capital gains tax, and also the couple other taxes that I supported, which I thought was good. One was the holiday for payroll tax. We had a carryback tax to allow people to carry back their losses 5 years instead of 2 years. Anything we can do in terms of taxes to help small businesses grow the economy. I think that's the important thing.
And Congress wasn't able to do that before adjourning.
Correct.
Your party's in charge. Why could you not convince them to get those tax cuts into?
Well, it was obviously there's a lot of different views on these tax cuts, but I'll guarantee you that when you go back, or when we go back, the number one item will be the tax cuts and how we're going to deal with them.
Okay. Job growth. You already talked about some ideas on promoting jobs. If the other two gentlemen, Mr. Coons, talk a little bit more about what you think out of Congress should be done to promote job growth.
Well, Congressman Mitchell already mentioned tax cuts, and that's something that I fully support. The idea that the government can take money from people and then give it to other people, and that's going to have a net increase in jobs it's kind of a ludicrous idea. It's like taking money or water from one end of the pool, putting it at the other end of the pool, and thinking that the level is going to rise, and it's not. So taxes definitely need to be cut pretty much across the board. And the idea of job growth is an effect of a strong economy. So you don't want to focus on creating jobs as much as you want to focus on strengthening the economy, which will then create jobs. It's kind of like if I look at my gas tank, I want it to say F, but I don't take the needle and push it over to F. I'm not going to focus on the effect. I'm going to focus on the cause. And the cause, in the case of jobs, is a strong economy. If we have a strong economy, that's going to create jobs. And the best way we can strengthen the economy is to keep taxes as low as possible, keep government spending and regulation as low as possible, because real jobs are created by the free market.
Mr. Mitchell.
One of the things that's important to create jobs and to get this economy going again is education. It's a long-term goal, but that's really important. I taught high school for 28 years here in Tempe, and my wife for 35 years here in this district. And I know that if we're going to be prepared and have these young students prepared for the 21st century, for this knowledge-based economy, with this worldwide economy, we are going to have to put more emphasis on education. And that's why, I've been a strong supporter, obviously because I was a teacher in education, but that's where it's going to be. America has always been the leader in innovation and being creative, and we can do that through education.
Okay. A little bit more on jobs.
Yeah, back to the jobs. Jobs are always a lagging indicator. When you start to see us growing jobs, it means we've started to engage in some economic growth. I appreciate what the congressman is saying about this special tax cut and this special tax cut, but the reality of it is our entire tax system has become a little bit perverse. Think of all the little special carve-outs that the lobbyists have gotten for this group or that group. The reality of it, it's time we engage and pursue a much flatter, simpler tax code. My wife and I run a small business, so we actually are out there trying to create jobs. And when you don't know what your future is like, good example is this health care bill. We keep being told it's going to be devastating to our business and the reaching out and hiring of employees across the community. How do you start to create economic growth when you have this overhang of what's tax policy going to be, what's health care policy going to be, what's your liabilities? It's time for some visibility for business to know where they're going.
Go back to the flatter tax that you're talking about. Your opponent's mailings, or perhaps the Valley's mailings, have hammered you on the flat tax, saying that it would lead to a 34% sales tax.
No, they're attacking me. They're attacking me on a consumption tax, something called the fair tax, which, as you know, because you sat in the room and you called the reporters, and the congressman knows too. 2 years ago we discussed that, and we made it very clear. You had checked up on the article. I've never stepped up and supported a consumption tax.
So, but tell us about the fair. Okay, then go to the fair tax.
You have some different types of tax policies. One is the concept of get rid of all income taxes, and you would pay at the register. And there, we would tax people on the consumption side, not on your savings side. The other side is a flat tax, saying, why don't we go to maybe 1 or 2 levels, leave some things that are deductible for your health care, for your mortgage deduction, but it would simplify, it would unemploy a lot of CPAs, but it would simplify our lives a lot. The fact of the matter is this constant wedging out a little something here and it expires in 2 years, and a little something here and it expires in 2 years. If we're going to start growing our economy, we have to have some understanding where we're going, particularly tax-wise.
What would the effect of the flat tax be? Would it put on various demographic groups, on the upper income, middle income, lower income?
Actually, for my understanding, depending on if you use the bifurcated versions, where folks who are functionally $35,000 and less literally get all the dollars back, from an actual tax burden standpoint, it wouldn't be much different than you have today. But the simplification and not having to game the system all the time. In other countries that have adopted a flat tax, they've actually seen their revenues go up dramatically because people are now playing by the rules.
Mr. Mitchell.
A couple of things. One, I know Mr. Schweikert says that he never said he was for the fair tax or the flat tax. But what he's done, he's endorsed, and he has said it more than once, Paul Ryan's plan, which is both the flat tax and the fair tax. Paul Ryan's plan, which includes both of those, is so radical. They've only gotten 13 Republicans in Congress to sign on. Even Mr. Boehner, the leader, has not signed on to this. So when you take a look at the flat tax, which would eliminate the home mortgage deduction, or the fair tax, which would put a sales tax on everything that we have, that would be food, clothing, medicines, whatever, everything. These are both very radical notions, and even though Mr. Schweikert said he never said he was for the fair tax, he said he was in favor of Paul Ryan's plan, which includes that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd love to find that quote. There's portions of Paul Ryan that are neat because someone is finally stepping up and saying, we have to be adults. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, We know the entitlement system comes collapsing down upon us in a few years. Let's get some adults stepping up and starting to figure out how we're going to fix it. There's a lot of things, and I have actually told this to Paul directly, I don't like much of his stuff on Social Security. I believe Social Security is a social contract that we have to protect. I can't go along with many of the things he has in there. So,
But you have supported, and you've said that you supported Paul Ryan's.
I'd love to find the quote for me.
Will.
I like the fact that Paul Ryan and others are finally stepping up and saying, here's an approach. Tear down what you have to, but some point here, we either are coming together and going to take on this debt monster, or we're going to lose our republic. It's time for the adults to step up and say, we got to fix this, people.
Mr. Mitchell, just the idea of a flat tax that would preserve a few of the deductions, mortgages.
My understanding, it would not preserve any of them. The idea of a flat tax.
But if there was a hybrid that did that, is that something you would support?
We'll
or would
certainly
you
look at
oppose
it, but the flat tax itself does not call for any kind of deductions, and it would eliminate the home mortgage deduction, which is, would be devastating to our economy and to home building.
Okay. Mr. Coons, let's give you a few minutes to get in here.
Well, if anybody's really familiar with libertarianism, then you probably know, you could guess, I don't really support any taxes. And I understand... And I understand the follow-up question to that is usually, well, then how do you afford X? And that, there's volumes written on those sorts of things and how things are paid for without taxes. Because if we have more time, we could go into some of those. But pretty much I look at it like this. When you take someone's property from them without their consent, it's called theft. You're stealing. If you take something from someone's paycheck and you give yourself a fancy name like government, you're still stealing. It doesn't matter what title you give yourself or how you go about it. If you're taking something from someone without their consent, you're stealing from them. And I don't support theft. So I would look to the market and people spending their money voluntarily on things that they want to be able to fund things. Now, when you get into things like national defense, it gets really complicated, or education. But there is a lot of literature out there on how to support those things.
Okay.
How come you get the feeling the libertarians always have all the fun?
Okay. Mr. Mitchell, I wanted to change the subject here. I hear more anger about your vote for the national health care reform than anything else you've done. How do you defend that vote?
Well, I know that we could not continue with the status quo. Every year, premiums are going up. The cost of medicine was going up, not only to individuals, but to businesses and to the government. It was not sustainable to keep what we had, and that's why I voted for it. Now, I think it's important.
Please.
Now, I think it's important to keep in mind there are many portions of this, the health care, which are now into effect and will continually go into effect. Okay. But I think that the reason I voted for it, we could not sustain the status quo.
How is this more sustainable? The criticism of it is that it creates uncertainty, it increases taxes on small business. Well, so how is this more sustainable than what we had before?
Well, it's for one, it was unsustainable because of the cost of what was happening, and so many people uninsured. The fact that people were taken off of insurance once because they used it or because they had a pre-existing condition. These are I think, important concepts that we should keep in mind. Now, unsustainable. The status quo was because, as I said, the price were continually going up. Now, it's not. You mentioned it was not understandable letters. It's just going into effect now. It'll finally be in effect in 2014. And I think the more people find out about it, the more they're going to find out, yes, there are a lot of good things in this bill and in this health care reform that we need.